Hello, human animal earthlings. It's great to have you joining us on Radio Free Georgia's In Tune to Nature program. I'm host Carrie Freeman, coming to you from Atlanta in October of 2025. And I'm excited today that we're going to be talking about polar bears and wolves and wildlife and climate activism through the tales of award-winning nature writer Marybeth Holleman, whose new book is the eco-climate fiction novel Bloom Again. It's a tale of two women in midlife, estranged childhood friends. Astrid, a paleo-botanist in Raleigh, North Carolina at UNC, and Elyse, a painter in Anchorage, Alaska. And they both eventually reunite while experiencing major life changes in their attempts to mitigate the climate crisis and take some risks in their career. And through them, we realize the road to climate solutions relies on a marriage of art and science. Now, polar bears play a central role in the plot of Bloom Again, so we'll talk about that, but along with kudzu and a lot of trees. I really I enjoyed reading Bloom Again a lot because I liked how the narrative pivoted back and forth between Astrid's dramas in one part of the world and then Elise's dramas in another, but with some connections between the two women and their group of friends and the shared environmental crisis that we face. And I also read another one of Marybeth Holleman's books last year that I wanted her to talk about also later in this show. And that book is a nonfiction book called Among Wolves. And it's co-authored with Denali National Park wolf researcher and staunch wolf advocate Gordon Haber, who tragically died when his small research plane crashed when he was out monitoring the wolves in the park in 2009. And Marybeth co-authored the Among Wolves book with Gordon, using his field notes and telling his story with Alaska's wolves and their drama after his death. Both books, Bloom Again and Among Wolves, are published by University of Alaska Press, and Marybeth resides in Anchorage, Alaska. Her website that links to all her writing is marybethholleman.com, and her last name is spelled Holleman. Welcome, Marybeth.
Hello, thank you so much for having me, Carrie. I'm just thrilled to be on this program.
Yeah, well, Mary Beth, we got to meet in person once when I visited Alaska for the first time last summer, and I interviewed you at your home, which is nestled in a woodsy yard, and it was for my book on wildlife coexistence in park regions. It was such a nice experience to be there at your little studio. Are you in the same studio this time, or are you in your house?
I'm in the house in
Yeah.
my office, and yeah, but I'm looking out at the little forest that we get to live in and the beautiful
Yes.
birch tree that I get to look out at every time I sit down to write. She's my muse.
Yes, very inspiring. And from my memory, I can recall a lot of the places that you mentioned in the book and around Anchorage, like when the Elise character meets her Siberian friend Nikolov at Elderberry Park. I would like looked it up. I was like, because I remember I'd gotten some tacos from a food truck around the corner, and then I ate them in that park before I walked down the Tony Knowles Trail along the water, and which is named for the former Alaska Governor Tony Knowles, who champions the rights of wolves and bears. So when you said that your character Elise sat down on a bench at Fish Creek with her friend along that trail, I was like, I could totally envision this. So yeah, so there's some, it's nice when it's in set in a real place with, like you mentioned, restaurants and like places that are really anyone who's ever been to Anchorage might be able to see that. And the same thing maybe with Chapel Hill and Raleigh as well. I thought
Yes,
that was cool.
yes. Yes. Well, it was fun for me too. I didn't want to, this is a realistic work of fiction. And
Yeah.
so I wanted to include those real places. And it's the writer's adage, write what you know, but I would say it's start from what you know and then let the characters take you where they want to go. And
Yeah.
so many of the places that Elise hikes with her dogs, or the woods that Astrid walks in North Carolina, or the restaurants, everything, they're all real places that I've been to, or they're, a mix of places that I've been to. But oh, yes, walking with no one but my dogs, just as it is for Elise, it's my bliss place.
Yes, and that's my next question because I could definitely tell that reading it because I'm when I'm reading your Bloom Again novel, I kind of envision the artist character Elise as living at your actual home in Anchorage, just like in my mind. And then I noticed that the Elise character often takes her husky dogs off leash to beaches and parks. and trails around Anchorage. And then I see at the end of your author profile, it says, when you're not kayaking the beloved fjords of Prince William Sound in the Gulf of Alaska, you're following your wild huskies up Alaska's mountains. So I was going to ask, is the character Elise partially or loosely inspired by your life as a creative professional and environmentalist in Anchorage?
Yes, I'd say, partially it is. Definitely her dogs
Yeah,
are
yeah.
based
They're
on
always there.
dogs
You're
that
always
I've
drinking
had.
tea. She's always drinking tea and doing stuff with the dogs.
That's right. So definitely some of the dog stories in there really happened. Like I had a husky who got away from me the way hers does right before a big trip. And so definitely that's drawn on my real life. And, Elise is a painter. I'm a creative writer. So we have in common that artistic sensibility. But I also, my undergraduate degree is in the sciences from Chapel Hill.
Oh,
So
okay.
Astrid is also draws from my life, but in a different way. It's like that what if question, like,
I
what if
didn't
I'd stayed in
realize
Chapel
that.
Hill?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
What
didn't
if I,
realize you had a science background.
yes, yes, I had a science background and I started out working actually in a research institute in Research Triangle Park, where basically my idea was that if politicians could just understand what scientists were learning about the world, that they would then make the correct policy decisions. There I
Insert laugh
was.
track here. Yes.
Yes, I know.
That's
Right out of
it
college,
makes so
I
much
was,
sense, Mary Beth.
it was very sensible. And
Yeah.
right out of college. So I was very young and excited and naive. And I worked in that for many years and thought, oh, this is frustrating, not working, so much more
Yeah.
complicated. And then I started thinking, well, how did I become, how did I grow my own sensibilities
Mm.
about the natural world and about uh, non-human beings? And I realized that a lot of it was through books that I'd
Yeah.
read. I'd always been a voracious reader my whole life, even as a child. And so then, I started thinking about the power of words. And so that's how I made the turn into writing. But I almost stayed in Chapel Hill and became a botanist like Astrid. I almost did
Oh,
that. I loved the academic life and I love plants. So so
yeah.
they're both they both start in some part of me and my personal history for sure.
And what personally brought you from you as the author, not a character, you from the East Coast of North America all the way out to the West Coast to live for so many years now in Alaska?
Yes, yes. I came up here in the mid 80s, mid early 80s.
Uh-huh.
And what happened is we were living in Chapel Hill, my husband at the time and I. We had this beautiful 10 acres of land that we lived on. It was lovely. But we really wanted to just check out the rest of the country. Other than a summer spent in Jackson Hole when I was in college, I'd never really spent any time in other parts of the country. So we bought a truck camper, we quit our jobs, we saved up money first, of course, and then we headed out and
Wow.
we were in traveling around the country, staying in our truck camper. It was so much fun. And
Yes.
we did what a lot of people do when they retire, but we just did it in our 20s instead.
That's what you're supposed to do. Have lots of little retirements.
Exactly. Yeah. When you can like hike down to the bottom of the Grand Canyon and back out
Yes.
again, when you're able to. And so we were in Tucson for a while. My first husband was a golf course mechanic, so he could get a job in that area really
Mm.
quick. And we were there for a few months saving up money again. And I found this ad for work in Alaska, summer jobs in Alaska. And so we came to Alaska just for the summer. The first summer was to sell tickets on the train that ran between Portage and Whittier, Whittier's on Prince William Sound. At the
Right.
time, there was no road there, so it was only the train that could get you there. And I fell in love with Prince William Sound. I
Yeah.
just, the mountains and the sea right there together,
Oh,
just like I'd
beautiful.
always dreamed. I grew up in the mountains, but the ocean was hours and hours away from Asheville. So we just stayed. I
Yeah.
just never went back.
Yeah.
One season fell into the next, and I got curious about winter, and then the oil spill happened in
Oh,
1989. Had an extreme, deep impact on me. Um, but yeah, so I've lived here ever since, and I live in Anchorage because it's fairly close to Prince William Sound,
yeah.
and there are jobs here.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a great city. Yeah, it is. Well, Mary Beth, your Bloom Again novel is part of a genre called eco-climate fiction. Can you tell us about that eco-climate fiction genre and why you were personally inspired to embed the climate crisis and all the changes we see around us as an influential part of the narrative?
Yes. Okay. Well, I've been writing about climate change for a while, and I've written some essays and poems, but I saw how I'd kind of done all I could in those forms. So that's one reason I turned to a novel, to fiction. And this is my first work of fiction. So
Wow.
it was a giant leap for
Yeah.
me in the same way that Elyse and Astrid are faced
Mm.
with giant leaps. I took one to enter into this form, but cli-fi is kind of a broad term. Labels are
Oh,
challenging, but
cli-fi. That's cute.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So eco-climate fiction, they call it
Oh,
cli-fi, climate
cli-fi.
fiction. But basically, it's fiction that addresses or imagines how climate change will affect our world. But
Hmm.
much of it is also science fiction, sci-fi. So they go places that are kind of beyond present day reality or possibility. But for my book, I really wanted to stay in reality. I wanted it to be entirely scientifically accurate. It was everything that is in the book either has happened or could happen.
Yeah.
Um, and so having that base in reality allowed me to explore what I consider two guiding threads. One is, how do average people in their everyday lives deal with something as amorphous and yet increasingly unavoidable like climate change or any other environmental catastrophe?
Yeah.
Um, so, besides scientific accuracy, it was important to me that the main characters be fairly ordinary people. Like, they don't have a lot of money, they
Right.
don't have a lot of fame, they don't have a lot of power. There's nothing super special about them. And then my other guiding thread was, how do women at that age in their life that's been called the second spring, when
Hmm.
the kids are fledged, the career is established as it's going to be, all those things we do in our early midlife where we're trying to get our household settled. That's all done. And they can have that space to find new inspiration, new ways of being in the world. It can be very exciting, but it can also be very unsettling. So both of these
Yeah.
women start at that point in that life in their lives where they have this internal sort of queasiness almost, like unsettled, like, what do I do now?
What's next? Yeah.
Yeah. So all that's wrapped into this eco-climate fiction that, I've been, the climate crisis is, well, it's just been unavoidable for me for so long that, yeah, I do feel compelled to write about it.
Yeah.
And I feel that fiction was a good way for me to enter into it at it from a new approach, a new angle.
Yeah, and reach a lot of new people who really like a lot of women would probably be drawn to this book about just women and their lives and relationships and their careers and their marriages and everything. And while you're reading about that, you're also kind of learning about how they feel about the environmental problems and how they want to be part of the solution. So it's like emotional. And so actually, yeah, I learned a lot from reading it as a writer myself, since I don't write fiction, just to see how it could be done and how effective it actually is. It's a new route to attuning people to this aspect, of our lives. That was great.
Absolutely. Yeah. People start to care about the characters. They get
Yeah.
invested in the characters, just like we do in a movie or anything. And then you're drawn in by the characters and you're carried along on that storyline. And I mean, we all love that, right? We all
Yeah.
love what's it like to be, Astrid, or what's it like to be Elyse, and why are they choosing these things, and what would I do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, for the artist character Elise, who lives in Anchorage, Alaska, she becomes enthralled very early on with the lone polar bear at the Anchorage Zoo named Binky. And she goes to visit her frequently and sits at Binky's enclosure and paints her and worries about her. Is that bear Binky real, or how did you decide to make polar bears part of the book in both Elise's and Astrid's lives?
Yeah. Uh, Binky was real.
Oh,
He, as a male, he
oh,
was a male polar bear. I made Binky female for reasons that are obvious when go deeper into the story. But
yeah.
he was not a happy bear, and his
Oh,
story always haunted me. Uh, Well, I wanted to read an excerpt if that's okay
yes,
with
please
you.
do.
It's Elise. She's sitting in front of Binky. She goes there a lot, um, as you said, to try to paint her, but also she's not really sure why she's spending so much time there. It's that sense of unease that she's feeling. Okay. Elise is daydreaming in front of Binky's enclosure. It's a sunny October day, but there's still a nearly constant crowd watching the polar bear, what with fall trips for elementary schools, an increasing number of shoulder season tourists, and the fall season becoming longer, more mild, colors changing later and later. She's looking forward to winter when she could be the only visitor in the zoo. Winter, when she used to bring her two wild boys to the park near the zoo. So many days, no matter the weather, she'd pick them up from school and head straight for the park. On those quiet, snow-soft days, the boys had the swing set all to themselves. Sometimes they'd raise up and howled towards the zoo and waited, silent, bright blue eyes ringed by frosted lashes. Sometimes the wolves in the zoo answered, their beautiful mourning for freedom ringing through Elise's very skin. If only she could paint that, she now thinks, that howling and its bodily reverberations. Her reverie is broken by a group of foreign visitors clapping their hands and speaking in the winding syllables of an Eastern language. Binky is sleeping, curled up, black nose tucked into her belly, looking as harmless as the chickadees that flit overhead, winging from branch to branch. Elise loves to watch Binky sleep. At least in dreams, she hopes, she can pad free across endless tundra and sea ice, those black eyes seeking the slightest darkening from a seal's breathing hole in the solid ice pack. But tourists don't like sleeping animals. So they clap and yell, trying to get the animal to react. Just as she's about to take her eyes from Binky and down to her sketch pad splayed across her lap, she sees something out of place. At the far corner of one of two 6-foot fences that surround Binky's enclosure, a man is climbing over.
Oh gosh.
Her first thought is that he's a zoo employee come to do maintenance or feeding. But why would he climb the fence? She jerks her head up as the man clambers over the second fence.
Mm.
He's a tourist, yes, she can tell by his plump fleece, jacket, zip-off khaki-colored pants, bright blue tennis shoes that look like they just came out of the box. But what is he doing? The man approaches the cage, sidling right next to the sleeping bear. He raises his camera with a heavy black lens and, incredibly, who would do this? Sticks the lens through the bars to snap a shot.
Mm.
That does it. The bear wakes up, jumps to her feet, and lunges, one giant front paw surging through the bars to grab the brightest, closest thing, a leg sporting the blue tennis shoe. The man pulls, but now Binky has his calf firmly in her jaws. People scream and yell at Binky to let go. A baby cries piercingly. Two people climb the fence, break off some willow branches, and begin beating Binky with them.
Mm.
Everyone is yelling, screaming, crying, and then Binky drops the leg, bites the blue shoe, tears it off. The man falls to the ground, lying on his back and grasping at his leg. Binky tosses the tennis shoe in the air, and it lands in the pool. She leaps in after her new toy. The crowd stands silent, aghast, as does Elise. Then they chuckle, point, and snap photos of the white bear playing with the blue shoe.
Mm.
Not Elise. A heat rises from her legs to her face. Why in the hell would anyone in their right mind do such a stupid thing? What rises in that blood-boiling place is this. My bear. How could that stupid tourist mess around with my bear?
Mm.
And what will become of Binky? A river of fear through her chest. Will they have to kill her now that she's attacked a visitor, even if that visitor was the one who put them both in danger? On the front page of the paper the next morning, there's Binky with a tennis shoe in her mouth. That photo circles the globe like wildfire, making Binky as famous as Annabelle the elephant, who learned to draw with her trunk and whose paintings sold at the gift shop and auctions around the state. Binky, meanwhile, tosses and tears that shoe to shreds, while letters pour into the zoo and newspapers, all with the same message. The bear is blameless. Let her be. Some people send more shoes for Binky. Even the fence climber, whose leg is on the mend, agrees that the bear is not at fault. Just a stupid tourist, he's quoted as saying. So Binky is safe, but her enclosure has new and higher fencing, along with signs every few feet stating the obvious. Do not climb the fence. The signs, the fence, the entire spectacle all make Elyse feel even farther away from the polar bear, farther away from finding whatever she is looking for. After a few more attempts to paint that luminescent fur, she gives up. Instead, she begins to sit and wonder what she can possibly do for all the wild polar bears who are also, thanks to climate change and their disappearing ice, moving farther away from her.
Mm. Oh, wow. That's a really powerful scene, isn't it? Did you ever see something like that? Although I'm sure you've seen people just like trying to get animals' attention and kind of yelling at them.
Yeah, yes, I've seen that at zoos. I used to take my son to the zoo a couple times when
Right.
he was, for school events, but that did actually happen to Binky.
Oh,
He
the
actually
real
did
bear. Yeah.
get the
Wow.
tourist blue shoe. And that
Yeah.
photo did circle the world, and people did send tennis shoes and ask them to leave the bear alone. It
Wow.
was it was an interesting moment because it reminded us of how much humans really do love wild animals, really do love uh, other animals, even if the expression of our love is often misguided.
Right.
But yes, it was a very similar thing that happened to him.
Yeah. And the bear and like the polar bears are a sign of climate change, as you mentioned, because they're the ones facing some of the most obvious effects of the melting ice. And they are in Alaska. And but then for her to be able to interact in Anchorage, where there really aren't polar bears, like having that zoo there brings that the bear character in. And then, but just the fraught relationship that we have with other animals. Because I can tell that you have a critical take on the zoos, because also I'll just read from page 22 in the book. It says, but she also embodies the reason Elise dislikes the zoo. A polar bear with no ice, a polar bear stuck in a cage. The bears and wolves and all the animals of the zoo captive, made to live in tiny enclosures just so this group of rambunctious kids can see them. What's more, she knows that what kids see at the zoo is not how these animals behave in the wild. She's read that zoo animals have smaller brains than their wild counterparts. They don't need much knowledge to survive life in a zoo. This gives her some solace. Perhaps these captives, like dementia patients, don't suffer as much because they don't know what they're missing. So is there a sense that this is also how you feel about the zoo, you as Marybeth Holleman, and through the fiction you can also express some of those bigger social concerns that you have?
Yes, absolutely. I live near the Alaska Zoo, so a
Ah,
lot of times when I'm going anywhere, I pass it.
yeah.
And I do a certain kind of Tibetan Buddhist meditation called Tonglen whenever I'm driving by the zoo. It's something, but it's a practice where you breathe in the suffering of those beings, and then you breathe out some kind of peace or contentment or joy to them. And I really think about them when I'm driving by there. I try to just send them, something that will give them some peace.
That's
Even
nice.
though, of course, I can't ever know what it's like to be a polar bear, or what it's like to be a wild one or one in a zoo. But it's the thing with zoos is it's complicated because I know that a lot of major zoos, not the one here, it's not big, but they also help in reestablishing wild populations, and so they're involved in conservation in certain ways. But I also know that can be done in other ways, like the red wolf
Right.
in North
Yeah.
Carolina, which is a parallel story for me.
Mm.
Um, there's places like the Wolf Conservation Center in New York, where they have captive red wolves, and that they're trying to use those populations to reestablish the wild red wolves in North Carolina. So the wolves aren't just there for public entertainment. It's still captive. I still have a lot of issues with it, but I don't have a solution.
Right.
And and that's I try to express that through Elyse too, that sort
Yeah.
of, well, she had to take her kid to the zoo because the kids class, it's that whole thing. And yet she also tried to get her boys out into the wild to see real wild animals in their natural habitat so
Right.
they can experience that. And that's really hard for people to do in most of this country. They don't get that opportunity. Um,
Right. Yeah,
but
in
when it's
Alaska,
possible,
it's
right?
it makes more sense. Or
Yeah,
this another writer friend of mine, Randy Malamud, said that he would take his kids even to the backyard instead of going to the zoo. And if you get down really close in the grass, even here in Atlanta, you can see all kinds of insects and like there's a whole other world. So you can also think of it that way, like there actually are all kinds of wild animals around us. You know, wherever we live, they're
yes.
just usually in cities, they're maybe not that big. Yeah.
Right. And that is equally fascinating. It really
Yeah.
is, especially for little kids. They
Yeah.
they they really and I that's wonderful that he does that, because that anywhere you live, you're going to have some birds
Yes.
alone if you just think about birds, and
Yeah.
insects, and yeah.
If you're just joining us on Radio Free Georgia, this is In Tune to Nature, and I'm host Carrie Freeman, talking with award-winning nature writer Marybeth Holleman about polar bears, eco-climate fiction, cli-fi, wolves, and wildlife advocacy as part of her new fiction book, Bloom Again. And we're going to also talk about her nonfiction book, Among Wolves, which is co-authored with the late Denali National Park wolf researcher Gordon Haber. Her writing is found at her website, marybethholleman.com, and her last name is spelled Holleman. Mary Beth, let's talk now about your book from 2013, Among Wolves, that is posthumously co-authored with Alaska wolf researcher Gordon Haber. How did you come to know Gordon Haber and like how would you describe him?
Oh, yeah. So when I first moved to Alaska, I moved from North Carolina, where red wolves were just being reintroduced into the wild, to a place where they were still shooting wolves from the air. And
Mm.
that contrast was not lost on me. So I immediately wanted to learn more about the gray wolves of Alaska and their treatment at the hands of humans. And so I went to hear Gordon Haber, this wolf biologist. He always was an independent biologist. He got funding from other sources. He never worked for the Park Service or he never worked for a federal or state agency. But he spoke at the university here, and I can still remember that talk. He knew so much about wolves, but more than that, he was incredibly passionate
Yes.
about wolves, about what he was learning about them, about their complex social lives, about individual wolves that he had observed over the years. And it was that passion that at that time, and still so somewhat today, you rarely see in scientists. They have this kind of dispassionate way of speaking about their so-called subjects, whoever it is they study. But not Gordon. And so he was just a um, very powerful speaker. But that's how I first got to know him. And then later, I got to know him on a personal level, because he and my husband, Rick Steiner, became friends and started to do what we can call good trouble. And that is trying to help the wolves of Alaska in various ways and advocate for them. And so I got to know Gordon personally that way.
Oh, that's awesome. And then was it after his tragic accidental death in the plane crash, Gordon's death, that you were asked to co-author a book with him, or were you already working on a book with all his field notes? And I know you did an artist in residence in Denali National Park, so I also didn't know if it was to write this book, like if that happened after
No.
Gordon passed away.
It all happened after he passed away. Gordon was very meticulous, and he had tried. He wrote a lot, scientific articles, and he had a great blog. But he had never put together a book. So after he died, at his memorial, was talking to his pilot of many years, many of his friends who live around Denali, and his family who all live in Florida. So no one was living here in Alaska, and we thought we should put together all his work and get it in a book for the general public to read because it's very powerful and groundbreaking. Um, but it ended up being just me because with the best intentions, everybody has their lives that they go on, and I was the only one that was actually a writer that had actually published some books. So um, I ended up getting permission from his family to go through all his photographs, all his field notes, all his little yellow write in the rain pads,
Mm.
everything, and have use of all of his material to put together this book. So I put it together after his death, and I like to say it's really easy to collaborate with someone when they're already gone.
But you always
But
win that argument about what should be included and what isn't.
yeah, and he was so passionate about wolves that I don't know if we'd ever gotten it done if we were trying to
Yeah.
do it when he was still around because he was so, um, there was always so much. But I feel that it's a good. I try to put as much of him in there as possible, and I even have little excerpts from his field notes or his
Yeah.
tweets, little moments, little snapshots, and then I interviewed a lot of people that spent time with him and included their stories in the book. So you get a sense of what he learned about wolves, but also who he was as a wolf biologist and how he approached his work in a way that is pretty rare, and that he basically put himself out there in the field observing them,
Oh, yeah.
not just radio collaring them and sitting at a desk and obtaining data. He was physically watching them in
Yeah.
all seasons. So,
Yeah.
the kind of
Alaska
work.
winters.
Yes, he'd go skiing with a backpack out. It's just insane. Well, it seems insane to us now, but of course, that's how Adolph Murray studied wildlife in Denali, and Gordon studied the Toklat wolf group, which was the same wolf family group that Adolph Murray studied. And Murray was the one who advocated for the creation of Denali National Park. Um, and so Gordon was able to continue studying the same family wolf group. It's a lot like Jane Goodall's work, that continuous following the same families
Yes.
of wild animals.
Yeah, I'm so proud of you, Mary Beth, for doing that, bringing to life all his photographs and his notes. And then we get to know all about the individual wolves because they have names. And so, because this book really, this Among Wolves book really affected me a lot. It was fascinating and emotional and upsetting. And it's like I'm leafing through the book pages now and that I
Mm-hmm.
have, and they're covered with all my highlights and my red pen, marking so many spirited comments that I have. Because I was so upset about all the people who were shooting or trapping wolves and harassing them. Like, I ended up calling some of those people names that I can't mention on the radio, but they're written in this book by me. And then I also just kind of often wrote the words idiotic exclamation point, ridiculous exclamation point, this is an outrage exclamation point. So I
Yeah.
imagine that you must have experienced similar emotions of outrage when writing this story. It's so much frustration because there's so much stupidity and cruelty towards
Yes.
these gray wolves who are native to North America.
Right. Yes. Who are part of the ecosystem, and we shouldn't. Yeah. It was hard to do. I will not lie. There was a lot of crying while I
Yeah,
was putting this together, but I felt so strongly about it. And my husband Rick helped a lot because he knew
great.
Gordon and he helped me sort through the material.
Yeah.
And with his scientific background, it was really helpful. And there was one, I have it in there. A lot of what's in there, I had already read because I'd read his blog and I'd read his papers. But I found this field journal. Actually, it was like a yellow legal pad that I found among his stuff where he'd handwritten about this one particular story. And the first time I read it, I cried. And
Mm.
then I thought, well, I got to include it. And then I wrote, I typed it up and I cried. I edited. I mean, every time I cried. It was just so horrific and so powerful because it tells us so much about who wolves are and who humans are sometimes. Shows the worst of us for sure. But uh, it was very challenging, but the book has been really, really useful for a lot of people.
Yes.
I hear from people trying to help the wolves in Yellowstone and the lower 48, and they
Yeah.
want to include an excerpt from the book in something they're doing. And I'm always, yes. Can I use a photograph? Yes. I always
Hmm.
have permission of his family, of course, but they're fine with that. And so it's really, it's, I think it's going to have a long life, and it means his work has a longer life and
Right.
doesn't die when he dies, and that's so important. So I'm always so gratified when I hear from someone that says, can I use an excerpt?
Yeah.
Please do it,
Yeah.
get it out there.
Well, and one of the main messages that I got from the Among Wolves book, in terms of what Gordon's meticulous observations taught us about wolves in Alaska's Denali Park region, is that wolf packs have unique cultures. Like, they have hunting and parenting cultures that they teach each other, and each wolf provides a special individual contribution to the family's survival. And that
Yes.
demonstrates that we can't continue to have old wolf management policies and hunting and trapping policies based on looking at wolves as just a whole species or a population group, as if wolves are all interchangeable units and you can get rid of X% of wolves and any of them is fine. Like, can
Mm-hmm.
you explain or give an example of how randomly killing off members of a wolf pack often causes the rest of the members of the pack to die, or just the pack to be diminished by losing their unique culture?
Yes, absolutely. So in wolf, Gordon stopped using the term pack, and he started using the term wolf family group
Family.
because, yeah, family group. Yeah, he was very aware of the power of language and and so he documented many times where there was an alpha female who was uh, caught in a trap, and for 2 weeks, her entire family group stayed around her
Mm.
and until she died and the trapper took her away. And then her mate immediately went to the natal den. Um, they use the same den every year if they can, and then he would go back and forth for over a month, back and forth from the natal den to where she had been killed.
Oh.
And a lot of the other family members would follow him, of course, because they all stayed together, and so that meant more of the family members were caught in that trap
Ugh.
line and died. And then finally the whole family group split up, and he's wandering around there alone, and he finds another female and they mate, but then they don't stay together, and then he finally gets shot. And so
Ugh.
the whole family group was absolutely just fragmented, and we don't know where all those wolves end up. But as Gordon said, that a wolf isn't just one animal. It can't survive for long alone. It's
Right.
10 or 20 animals, typically an extended family, all acting as one in order to survive. They have complex societies, and it takes a long time, several generations, he said, for them to develop the unique hunting skills for their territory. Like the Toklats lived in an area that had a lot of Dall sheep in them, so very high, rugged mountains, and they had specific techniques for hunting sheep that are not easy, but
Yeah.
they knew how to do them. And when that family group fell apart, the remaining young members didn't know how to do that. They had to subsist off smaller mammals to try to get by. They
Like, they
couldn't
eat
catch the sheep.
rabbits, like rabbits or something now, because they can't
Right,
kill sheep because they don't know
right.
how.
Rabbits, voles, all
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And wolves are excellent hunters. I don't want to go too long, but the zoo used to have some wolves. They used to have 6 wolves, and we did a little wolf walk there one day, and so they were walking down this path, and one of the female wolves, Willow was her name, she all of a sudden jumped off the path, caught a vole, killed it, skinned it, and peed on it, all in about 5 seconds.
Whoa.
you know to basically say, this is mine, I'll come back for it later. But like if my dog catches, I used to have a Siberian Husky that catches voles. Well, she would catch it and kill it, but she wouldn't like skin it. I mean, she didn't know how to like,
She didn't know what to do once she
like
caught it. And a vole is kind of like a little mouse type
it's like a
animal.
little mouse. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. It's a little tiny mouse. But it was just, seeing that I thought, oh my gosh, they're such good hunters. But when you're talking about going after Dall sheep in a Rocky Mountain where the sheep know how to protect themselves, it's another story.
Yeah.
You have to have that culture of learning the older wolves, teaching the younger wolves how you do this.
Because they usually also do that as a coordinated pack. Sometimes an individual could bring down a sheep, but for the most part, they need to work together. So that's also,
Absolutely.
they have a coordinated system.
They do.
Well,
Yeah.
to end our discussion of the Among Wolves book, I know you mentioned that there's so many wolf stories that affected you. Just in a minute or two, is there a particular wolf story from the book that you want to introduce us to?
Yes, I already told you about the mate, who kept going back. I told you a sad one.
Yeah,
So I'm going to tell you a happy one.
good.
There's a wolf family group. So when the pups are born, they stay near the den for a while, and then they gradually are taken on little puppy walks a little further away from the den to kind of learn their terrain. At some point, they have to cross these braided rivers that we have in Alaska. Braided rivers, basically because our valleys are so wide and so new. Instead of having one channel, you could have a dozen channels of water.
Oh.
So it's three females and four pups, and the pups are crossing for the first time. And Gordon's observing this. And there's the mother, another older female, and then a 2-year-old female who has a slight limp. She always has. Um, the pups cross most of the braids just fine, but the last one's deeper and has a cut bank, so it has like a really fast moving water. Two of the pups make it across fine, but then the last two are really hesitant, and so the young 2-year-old goes out in the stream and tries to help them. She splashes the water like it's okay, and he has photos of all of this, and
Yeah,
this photo
right.
sequence is in the book.
Yes.
um, and then she finally convinces one to cross, and then the other crosses, little black pup, and he ends up in that cut bank in that swift current, and so she gets in the current downstream of him to block the stream of water so that he has like an eddy, so that a quiet water that he can
Mm,
crawl out on the bank on. It's
wow.
just, I mean, it's amazing, that this wolf knew all these techniques to help these pups and persisted at it. The other two females were observing, like they knew, oh, she's got it, we're
Yeah.
fine. But it's that same, it's taking a group. It's not just the mother and the pups, it's all of these wolves working together for even just the smallest things like teaching the pups to cross a river for the first time.
Yeah, that is a great story with the pictures. And once you started telling it, I'm like, oh, I know this story because I remember it with the pictures. And yeah, that's a great example of how it takes a village, as we say. Like you, if a mother wolf cannot raise pups on her own, like she cannot
Mm-mm.
go get the food and keep them warm and everything. Like it takes a whole extended family unit. And so you really learn about all the different roles in the family and the different personalities because not every young wolf would have done what this particular one did in helping out her brothers and sisters or cousins or whatever. So it's
Mm-hmm.
it's also just interesting to hear about the different personalities and everything of the wolves. And again, what you really learn through Gordon's work and through like Rick McIntyre's work with the Yellowstone wolves is the personalities and the uniqueness of them. So when somebody just randomly hunts or shoots or traps a wolf, like we know who that was and who else is affected. It's not just quote unquote a wolf, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's
Well,
funny because
yeah.
we know this about humans. We
Yeah.
don't think of humans as some big group. We're individuals. It's also
Yeah.
true for
We're
all
not
other
all
animals too.
interchangeable. Yeah. And, and
Right.
and also we have dogs and these are also canines, so it should be obvious that if we see the different personality types and the thought processes and emotions of our dogs, that these other animals are going to have that, even though wolf culture is somewhat different than, our domesticated dog culture. But
Yeah.
well, to wrap up, Mary Beth, what do you hope readers are inspired to do based on engaging with your books? Like, what could they do to be part of the solution to protect animals and the environment?
Yes. Well, the central theme in Bloom Again is this idea of collaboration, collaborating with other humans, other groups, and especially with the more than human world. And I feel that that is really important now, that we look to each other, but not just humans, and that we go out in the non-human world and we listen to what the birds, we really try to pay attention. And I think that there are some creative and novel and exciting solutions that we just need to discover. I have a lot of hope in that, in terms of biodiversity loss and climate change and just our attitude towards the world beyond humans. And I also think it's important for people to just step up and do what you can and look at the intersection of what you love to do and what the world needs. What
Yeah.
I love to do is I love to write. What does the world need? The world needs writing about what is our relationship to the natural world and what is it really, what can it be? And so I focus on that. And to step out of, it's so easy to get paralyzed and overwhelmed, like
Yeah.
Elyse is at the beginning of the book. And to step out of that paralysis, just do one thing, just like
Yeah.
one simple thing, and don't get stuck being overwhelmed by the hugeness of the task. Remember, you're one person, you're working with a lot of other people. There's a lot of great people in the world. And find that thing that you can do. And that's what Elyse does. It comes to her
Yeah.
for painting and Astrid for science, but also the collaboration of those two.
Yeah.
It's one of my readers, early readers of the book. She said, that saying, rather than see something, say, if you see something, say something. She
Yeah.
said, well, what this book says is, if you feel something, do something.
Ah,
And I
nice.
love that because it's so important to keep our hearts open
Yes.
and not close down to all the suffering in the world. Like, Among Wolf has a lot of sad stories in
Oh,
there, a lot of
yes.
outrageous things. And it's important to keep our hearts open no matter how hard it is, because it's like that Leonard Cohen quote about there's a crack in everything, and that's how the light gets through. So we keep looking for the light. So that's a general thing. And
Yeah.
what individuals do, I think it's different because it depends on what we like to do.
Yeah.
And what if we like it, then we can keep doing it. We won't get burnt out. We'll be able to sustain it.
Yeah.
And
And
we
if there's
need to do that.
certain species, like a lot of people are drawn to birds, or yeah, maybe the wolves, like or bison or bears. I mean, there's so many species of animals who actually need a lot of help and protection, especially predatory animals. And so, yeah, and if you're really drawn to them, like there's always an opportunity for you to protect them. So that's also, there's just a lot of animal protection in your work, which is something that I do as well, which I really appreciate about
Hmm.
what you're doing.
Yes. And so your radio show, reaching out to people,
Yeah, that's what we're doing,
that's
right? That's our thing right
advocacy.
now.
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it reaches people. I mean, it's not just, as we know, it's not just our minds that are involved, it's our hearts. And we have to
Definitely.
reach people on all those levels.
Yeah. Well, that's the end of our show, but I want to thank you, Marybeth Holleman, for being with us on Radio Free Georgia's In Tune to Nature program. Thanks for your inspiring nature writing that draws us into the lives of environmental advocates and the wild animals and plants that inspire them. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in Tune to Nature, broadcasting every Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, online at wrfg.org, and on Atlanta radio station 89.3 FM. I record from Atlanta in the foothills of the Appalachia Mountains in the Muskogee Creek Territory and former range of the Red Wolf, now home to many coyote families and still a million squirrels. And they rely on our many trees. You can access action items, news, and podcasts on the show's website, wrfg.org/intune to nature. The views and opinions expressed on this show do not necessarily reflect those of Radio Free Georgia, its board, staff, or volunteers. I'm one of those volunteers. I'm host Carrie Freeman, asking you to please support independent, non-commercial media like Radio Free Georgia at wrfg.org. And remember to take care of yourself and others, including other species, like polar bears and wolves. Thank you for listening. Cheers. Let's end with some audio of my brother's husky dog, Growl howling. Her name is Django. I'm doing this in honor of the fact that Marybeth was talking about her huskies in the book.